All right, we're outside Camden, South Carolina, at the site of the Battle of Camden, which was one of the battles in the Southern campaign during the War of Independence. Your main units were British Army under Lord Cornwallis and the American Army under Horatio Gates. But let me just back up a little bit. I'm here mainly because my fifth great grandfather, William Beasley, fought here, and he was with the 2nd Regiment of North Carolina Militia, raised out of Craven County, North Carolina, around the town of New Bern, where all my other ancestors were. This was a hard lesson for the Americans to learn, because you had an American army which outnumbered the British Army 2-1, but you had mostly militia with some Continental regulars from Maryland and Delaware going up against Cornwallis's 2,000 British regulars. And the Americans thought, because they had the numerical superiority, that they could go toe-to-toe with the British. Well, this would be the last time in the Southern Theater that would have ever happened. At the outset of the battle, the first volley that the British fired, you had the entire regiment of Virginia militia threw down their weapons, broke and ran. Most of the North Carolina militia broke and ran, but there was a brigade of North Carolina militia, which of course William Beasley was a part of, that stood and fought alongside the Delaware and Maryland regiments. At the point that the militia broke and ran, Major General Horatio Gates found a speedy horse and took off and actually outrun his fleeing troops. And it was said that he didn't stop his horse until he had gotten 60 miles to Hillsborough, North Carolina. But anyway, left on the field to command the Americans was the brave Frenchman, the Baron Johann de Kalb, who stayed in front of his troops and actually went toe-to-toe for about an hour with the British until they were outflanked by British cavalry. He was finally forced to retreat, and while still leading his troops, he was shot off his horse and was shot three times and bayoneted 8 times. His aide, which his name was Chevalier Roulin, actually threw his body in front of him. I'm sorry, his name was Chevalier Dubois. He threw his body in front of de Kalb and actually took some of the bayonet hits. And later, Cornwallis, seeing de Kalb wounded on the field, told de Kalb, he said, "I'm not sorry to see you vanquished, but I am so sorry to see you so badly wounded." And Cornwallis personally had de Kalb taken into Camden and was cared for by his personal physician until he died 2 days later. If you look over here, you see this monument. This is the exact spot where the Baron de Kalb was mortally wounded. And you can see people have left little mementos and rocks and put it on the top there. You know, as I said, de Kalb was a Frenchman, but as France got involved in the Revolution late in the war, de Kalb joined up with George Washington, was at Valley Forge, and then eventually was sent down here into the Southern Theater and fought bravely. And we're going to go see his grave later, and I'll talk a little bit more about him. But this is pretty much where it turned into a complete rout, and the American troops ran for their lives through the swamps. Out of 4,000 troops, only 1,000 of the Americans managed to escape, and most of those guys were wounded. But anyway, we'll touch more on the Baron de Kalb when we get to his grave. Okay, we're here at a historic Camden, where there's a lot of historic buildings and things here, but here you can see a replica of a wall that Cornwallis actually erected that did a semicircle around the entire city of Camden. And if you look over this way, if Melissa can zoom in over there, you can see a replica built on the original foundation of Lord Cornwallis's headquarters that he used before the Battle of Camden and after the battle until he was forced to evacuate Camden in 1781. But if you look around, pan around, you can see it's a beautiful park here, all kinds of historic buildings, and there is a whole lot to see here. But we're going to end our trip. We're going to go to the monument of the General DeKalb grave. This is the final resting place of General DeKalb. Probably can't read it here, but in the epitaph it says, "Here lies the remains of Baron DeKalb, a German by birth, but in principle a citizen of the world." And on this side it says, "He was second command at the battle fought near Camden on the 16th of August 1780 between the British and Americans, and there nobly fell covered with wounds while gallantly performing deeds of valor and rallying the friends and opposing the enemies of the adopted country." You can see back here in the foreground, the background is the Bethesda Presbyterian Church. That's where he's interred here in downtown Camden. As far as my ancestor that fought here, in 1797, William Beasley and two other patriarchs of my ancestors, Daniel Doherty and Moses Taylor, who were also patriots, took all their family, their children, their grandchildren, about 50 people, and came by ox cart from Craven County, North Carolina to the Cumberland River. From the Cumberland River, they took flatboats to the Ohio River and up the Green River to Warren County, and then eventually migrated the next county over into what would become Butler County, Kentucky. William Beasley applied for pensions late in life and also left his wife a widow's pension, and thanks to that I was able to gather enough information to where it brought me here to Camden, and I was able to, you know, walk the steps that he stepped back in 1780, and oh, it's just been a great trip. It's worth the trip to come here. If you're ever on your way to Hilton Head or Myrtle Beach, definitely need to plan a trip to come here.